Hi, this is Garibay, and today I'm going to be talking about writer tropes. So I recently I've been thinking a lot about writer tropes, and the reason why is I really love seeing movies, and actually I'm getting a little sad because I kind of feel like the 2017 movie season is over, right? Like all the hot, cool movie properties are out, so there's a lot of great movies this year. Dunkirk was a fantastic film. Also, Fate of the Furious 8, I was a really big fan of that. There's just been a whole lot, actually, a whole lot of great films this year. And but there's Baby Driver, definitely one of my favorite films of this year. Really, really strong. And then also, one of the things I was thinking about is just some of the movies that I was really disappointed with for one aspect or another, right? And one of the biggest ones was War for the Planet of the Apes. I really like that film, but I am an evangelical Christian and I'm an American patriot. So, and that film, if you watch it carefully, there's two really strong kicks in the teeth to each one of those groups, right? I feel like that film was really, really just swinging for evangelical Christians and for American patriots, and that's sad, and I don't really understand why it would be necessary to put that in that film. Now, one thing that I am also aware of is I really don't, because I'm such a big movie fan, I'm really aware of when I start to complain about Hollywood because they're not serving up movies for an evangelical Christian. I know that's kind of almost fruitless to complain about, right? So one of the reasons why I'm talking about this today is I'm going to try to come at this topic from an angle that is beneficial to Hollywood writers and not just complainy from the perspective of an evangelical Christian. All right, so let's talk about writer tropes, okay? So first, let's talk about tropes real quick. So a trope, right? A trope would be the gunslinger stare, okay? And so the gunslinger stare, that term has a whole lot of freight. You're going to see that in a Western. And when two gunslingers stare at each other, you're going to hear the whistle. It's going to... And then at that point, what's coming next. Those two gunslingers are going to trade some harsh words, and then they're going to have a shootout at high noon the next day, okay? Now, this is a perfect example of a trope, okay? But it's also... It's a genre trope. It belongs to the Western genre. The trope itself has weight, right? So once you see that gunslinger stare, you know what's going to happen. It triggers off these events, right? And one thing that's also challenging about tropes is a lot of times they're tropes because they're so effective. The gunslinger stare that causes drama, and generally you want to know. These two are going to face off. Who's going to live and who's going to die? There's drama in that, right? And there's usually drama in tropes, right? Or there's a kernel of effectiveness in a trope, right? Now, I don't think there's a kernel of truth. I just think that it makes good drama and it can be effective for telling stories, right? But one of the other things about tropes, right, is that, especially genre tropes, is that writers are hyper aware of tropes. And this has become a good thing. It's allowed us to enter into the golden age of television. I'm not sure if we're in the golden age of movies. There's certainly a lot of great movies out there, but I'm starting to think that movies are actually struggling more than television, right? So let's get back on the path here. So with tropes, writers are hyper aware of genre tropes, okay? What they're not aware of, and what I've recently become aware of, and really, now that I've been thinking about it, I'm just seeing it constantly, right? Are writer tropes, right? So the two big writer tropes that we come across a lot, because they're so frequent, is the American television writer, the tropes connected to American television writers, and the Hollywood writer, okay? Now, the Hollywood writer writes films, okay? And I believe that there's a very long list of, actually, it's a distinct list of writer tropes, Hollywood writer tropes. So here's a few, okay? A good example is tags. So Hollywood writers will attach tags to characters. A perfect example of a tag would be environmentalist, right? So you have a character, doesn't matter what, where this character, doesn't matter what genre in, doesn't matter if they're in a police procedural film, doesn't matter if they're in a science fiction film, you attach environmentalist to them, and that trope is going to carry freight, okay? The variance on what Hollywood writers think about environmentalism is virtually nothing. About 99% of all Hollywood writers feel the same way about environmentalism, which means you have a trope. The moment the environmentalism tag is attached to a character, I can already know that this character is going to be attractive. They're going to be clever. They're going to be smart. They're going to be kind. All those things, okay? And the reason why is that is a tag that Hollywood writers attach a ton of positivism to. And so they're going to attach all these positive aspects with environmentalism, okay? Now, sometimes, very rarely, a Hollywood writer will break its own trope, right? But when they do break their own trope, it's not because they're aware of the trope. It's because Hollywood writers do value certain things higher than their own tropes, which I think generally is subconscious. They're not really aware of their own tropes, right? And that is pacing, excitement, and story movement, right? So they want their content to be exciting, engaging. They want it to move quickly. That would be the pacing part. And if a trope is getting in the way of that, they'll break that trope, okay? But that's almost the only time you'll ever see a Hollywood writer trope sacrificed, is in order to keep that content engaging on those other levels, on pacing and excitement and all that other thing, right? Now, one of the reasons, I just want to talk real quick about why I'm talking about Hollywood writer tropes, right? So the reason why I'm talking about Hollywood writer tropes is, one, I became aware of it when I saw one that was incredibly strong. It's very similar to the strength of environmentalism, right? It is the trope about the hypocrite Christian, right? So generally, evangelical Christians, if you see an evangelical Christian in a Hollywood film, they're never going to vary. They will almost never vary. I would say 1 in 100, you'll see a variance on this, right? But 99 Christians portrayed in a Hollywood film are going to be portrayed, the moment you see, there's the cross, that person's a Christian, you know what's going to happen. They're going to be outwardly righteous, and they're going to be secretly hypocritical and evil, period. Like, it never varies, right? And perfect example of this is War for the Planet of the Apes. Another Hollywood writer trope is that they don't really understand Christianity from the perspective. They often understand Christianity deeply, but the differences between Christians and types of Christians are not important enough for them to reflect. They're often aware of them, but they don't really care about them, right? A good example is War for the Planet of the Apes. The general in that film, he displays both evangelical aspects, and which the vast majority of evangelicals are Protestant, and so he displays Protestant aspects and non-Protestant aspects, and the Hollywood writer will just mix them together because they're either not aware of the differences between Protestants and non-Protestant Christians, or they just don't care. They don't care enough to make the differentiation, right? And so I'm really aware of this trope, and it really keeps me from enjoying a lot of Hollywood content, right? And so I'm hoping this trope will die, right? Well, what's the best way to kill a trope for writers? Just make them aware of it. Writers want to create cool, engaging content, and tropes are a huge blocker for cool, unique, engaging content. So by just talking about Hollywood writer tropes, I think there's a chance that this will, reach people who talk to Hollywood writers or are Hollywood writers. And once they're aware of it, they may stop doing it, right? And so I think and then also, I would also, call out to Hollywood. Hollywood loves money. which, they want their projects to do well commercially, right? And I don't even think that's a bad thing. It's just a fact, right? So one of the things I think is there's some signs that recently came out in the end of 2016 that there might be a lot more evangelical Christians than people had expected, right? So that if you, as an entire market, as Hollywood as a whole, if they were to drop some of these writer tropes, especially the ones about evangelical Christians, it would be helpful to them, one, in creating more engaging content, and then two, it would be helpful from the perspective of making their projects more commercially successful. And so I've really been thinking a lot about these writer tropes, and I'm bringing it to the fore with the idea that maybe now that writers are aware of writer tropes, maybe some of those writer tropes can start to die, which would really be interesting. So if you're a writer out there, I don't need to tell you to be aware of tropes. There's actually a catalog of tropes that every decent writer is fully aware of. It exists on the internet. You can go, you can see every single trope there is, just cataloged like a Barbie doll collection, right? And so writers are highly aware of tropes. I'm positive that they're aware of genre tropes, but now I'm trying to call out writer tropes. So think about your own writing and think what writer tropes you have, right? By the way, I've been thinking about this. What are my own writing tropes, right? So I'm a writer, and I've written 2 novels, and I have some really significant writer tropes. So one of them is a positive tag for me, where when I attach this tag to somebody, almost always they're going to be attractive and kind and smart and clever, right? Is a reader, right? A book reader, specifically a book reader, right? So because I'm a writer, I read, right? So every time I bring forward a reading character, they're always the best person in the world, right? Yes, it's my own writer trope, right? So I'm trying to recognize my own writer tropes, and then once we recognize those tropes, we can break those tropes. So if you're a writer, be aware of your own writer tropes. Thank you, everyone. Take care.